Good afternoon, or almost technically exactly noon, everyone. My name is Jody. I'll be your MC for today's panel about the JET program. I'm joined by 3 other alumni of the program. We've got Lucas, Rosie, and Samantha as well. We're all going to introduce ourselves in a moment and more in depth, but first I'm going to give you a quick introduction about the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program, also known as the JET program.
Real quick, Jody. Can everybody hear Jody?
Can y'all hear? Everyone hear? Good, great, okay. I'll also use full teacher voice. So, JET program is a highly competitive employment opportunity of a lifetime, fully supported by the Japanese government. It allows participants to work in schools and government offices throughout Japan. The majority of people who participate in the JET program are assistant language teachers, also known as ALTs, but some people are coordinators for international relations. Those typically have a really high level of Japanese, and those work with governments and provide translation and interpretation services. Then there's a really small, almost mythical group of people called the Sports Exchange Advisors, also known as SEAs, and they do sports exchange advising, but these tend to be like Olympic level retired athletes who go over, and those positions are pretty few and far between, but they do technically exist. So with that, I'm going to let the other panelists introduce themselves more in depth, starting with Lucas.
Hey everyone, my name is Lucas Young. I was on the JET program in 2013, located in Gunma. You can maybe see, it's one of those stars there. And yeah, so I was there from 2013 all the way to 2020. I got back in October 2020, and now I work at the Embassy of Japan as a JET program coordinator. So now I live and breathe the JET program. Yeah, thank you, I appreciate it, thank you so much. Living and breathing JET program. I know lots of ins and outs. Yeah, I was teaching at a junior high school for the first 2 years, and then at a high school my last 5 years. And that was actually in another program as well, the Chiba, Wisconsin program. Good to see you all here today.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rosie. I was a JET on the program from 2017 to 2019 in Ishikawa Prefecture, which, fun fact, our claim to fame is that we are the non-tropical place in the world that gets the most rain per square inch in the entire world. It was amazing. And I taught at 9 middle school and elementary schools while I was there, and I currently work as a children's book author. Thank you, thank you.
My name is Samantha. I was also on JET from 2017 to 2019. I was in Aomori Prefecture, which is the star all the way up there. I was in sort of central Aomori, and I worked at 3 high schools, and we actually have the city that gets the most snowfall per year, so that was great. I actually really liked that.
Sweet. And as I mentioned, my name is Jody. I was in Miyazaki Prefecture, which is way down in Kyushu. I was there from 2013 to 2017, so 4 years in total, all at the same commercial, non-academic high school. Our claim to fame, I guess, is that we're the second poorest prefecture after Okinawa. I mean, that's kind of depressing. We also have really good beef and hyuganatsu, which is like if a lemon and an orange got together and had a baby. Oh, not the poor one. Okay, I'll flip it.
No, I gotta say something about mine.
So just ignore what you heard. We've got fruit.
But can I say Guma's fame, by the way, is the hot springs. Kusatsu Hot Springs is an amazing place you must go to. It also has the #1 amount of cars per capita in Japan, because they make a lot of cars there, and pachinko machines, those gambling things, #1. Hey, just had to plug that in there.
Yeah, we have to get all the plugs in. Yeah. So now we're going to start with some of our pre-chosen questions for our panelists. Afterwards, we're going to open it up to all attendees to ask questions, but first we're going to start with a couple slightly pandering MAGFest questions. So first, we're going to start with what is your favorite anime/manga and character, and we'll start with Lucas.
My favorite anime is Full Metal Alchemist. I love that one. I've watched it quite a few times. Although that also comes after the OG, the Cowboy Bebop. That was what I started with a long time ago. But my favorite character might actually be Mob Psycho. I think he's hilarious and just so much fun. Like, that kid's great.
Great.
You're right. Favorite anime, if I start listing that, we're going to be here all day. So current anime that has taken over my life is Erased. Not because I think that mystery was super good, it was very obvious, but just something about it has really stuck with me. And current favorite character, Deku, my boy, love him, cries a lot, and I am a big fan of that.
But my favorite anime is kind of an obscure one. It's called Last Exile. It's a, I got one. It's like a steampunk type anime. My favorite character is Dio. Not that one, different Dio.
Awesome. And for me, also Full Metal Alchemist. I think a lot of us started with it on like Adult Swim or Toonami, so that's how I fell in love with it. And my favorite character is Ed, just because I am also short and identify with that. Okay, so next up is, what is your go-to game at a Japanese arcade?
Mine is rhythm games, specifically Taiko no Tatsujin. I was so floored and nostalgic feeling when I saw that they had it today. I got a blister this morning just from playing it too much. That's one I go to.
Awesome.
Lucas stole my answer because mine was also Taiko no Tatsujin.
Oops, sorry.
So second one would have to be the crane games, because I figured out how to game the system, and by the time I left Japan, I had so many that I could not ship them back to America, and I had to throw them out, and it was very depressing.
So I'm also a rhythm game fiend, although Taiko is not my go-to. I usually play Groove Coaster, and if they don't have that one or if it's being taken, then I will also play Mai Mai.
So continuing, Taiko no Tatsujin or DDR were typically my two. Awesome.
Joe, do you mind if I quick ask one question to the audience?
Yeah.
First, who's heard of the JET program before? Anyone? Anyone's first time hearing about the JET program? All right. Wow. Welcome. If you have heard of the JET program before, you might have heard that some people think that on the essay that it is stigma to like anime and like games. That is definitely not true. We are here today. We all love anime. That's kind of the reason why we asked those questions just now. We love anime. A lot of us actually wrote it on our essays as well. Like, that's how we got introduced. So if you were worried about that, don't worry. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So now we're going to move into the more JET-specific questions. So what are you doing now, and how did JET prepare you for it?
So I am a JET program coordinator at the Embassy of Japan. I've been there for 2 years now, and I don't think I could have gotten this job if I wasn't actually on the JET program, for one thing. So that definitely got me there. But it's given me lots of different skills that I need for this job, such as organizational skills, intercultural communication skills, Japanese skills. I've definitely improved my Japanese while I was living there. And all that has definitely helped me to get the job that I am at now. It also, the JET program, like living in another country, it basically gives you so much more flexibility and openness to a new culture. And a lot of employers, especially like at Embassy Japan, they're looking for things just like that, where you can be adaptable, flexible, and open to new ideas.
So, like I said, I'm currently a children's book author. I've written books with Macmillan, with Disney. My most recent release actually was a Black Panther prequel graphic novel that came out with Scholastic, Wakanda Forever. And so while that is kind of like on the surface very different from what I was doing with JET, I think probably the skills that prepared me most for the jump into publishing was JET's sort of, it's very much what you get put into is what you get out of it kind of program. And it was the first job where I really had to learn how to advocate for myself, like push myself out there and really like think on my feet and be able to like just kind of roll with the punches. And that has helped me a lot moving into like arts-based job full time.
So I'm actually still a teacher. I'm an elementary school ESL teacher. And I did get that job technically through the JET network. I came back and went to an Alumni Association event, and somebody there was connected to the school, and it just all sort of worked out. But I mean, obviously it's directly connected. I got teaching experience, so that helped me with my job now. But I think the skill that people probably underestimate the most from teaching is public speaking. Because people don't think of it as a public speaking job, but it very much is. And it was nice to be able to develop that and also discover a real love for like presenting and speaking to a crowd, but also like a group of kids.
And I'm currently working for an insurance company, but I'm in our e-learning section. And I got there in kind of a weird way. I came from study abroad, and which was much more directly related to JET. But JET really helped me focus on what I like in a job and what I don't. I realized I like teaching to a degree, but I do not like high school students. Or because I like working with students who are motivated to actually learn. Mm-hmm. But I think the biggest thing I got out of the program in general was flexibility. I have OCD and ADHD, and I was very rigid to sort of keep myself in line to get through college and things like that. And then when I got to the JET program, obviously I can't control my environment. I can't control anything. I got attacked by bugs. Like things like that you can't control. And so I had to get good with with being vague and that uncertainty that you have in Japan. Great, thank you all. So now, next question is, what is your best memory, one of your best memories working on the job itself? So we'll start with Lucas.
So working on the job itself, one of my favorite memories was these things that we had called ALT days. ALT means assistant language teacher. We were always co-teaching with our teacher there. But we had something called ALT days where all of the ALTs would come to our school and we would work with all the students, and there we got to see the students play games, give presentations, and do lots of different things. And that's, for me, was one of the best times working because you really got to see the students really enjoying English, using English in a very realistic setting or a relevant setting. And you could just see how much joy they had, speaking to more foreigners, and also just got to demonstrate like what they've been learning in class. So that was my favorite time working at the job.
Great, Rosie?
So my favorite memory, so I was teaching, most of my base schools were middle school, and as you guys probably know, middle school students, not always enthused, so there was always that like, is anything I'm doing clicking, like, am I making any difference here? And then the day of our cultural festival came, and I was actually sick that day. I didn't want to come in, but this was back when someone's sick and they would drag you into work, and so they're like, come in. And during the cultural festival assembly, I was just knocked out in there because my Japanese was not good. I did not know what was happening. And I just remember like a teacher like shaking me awake, like, Rosie Sensei, get up, get up. I was like, what'd I do? And it turned out they were doing their, what is our favorite thing in school? And all the students were supposed to bring up their favorite stuff. And like the 7th grade class had all voted I was their favorite thing in the school. And so they dragged my sick body up to the stage. And I remember standing there like, and they like all started like put their hands around me, started singing. And I was like, yay. I did not know what was happening. Later on, a teacher who spoke English explained it to me. And in hindsight, I'm like, that's the sweetest thing anyone's ever done for me. And I was passed out for half of it. So.
Aw, that's really sweet. Okay, so going from happy to a little more difficult, Samantha, what was a difficult thing and how did you overcome it?
So something that was hard for me was the idea of driving. I'm not a big driver in the States. I have a license, but quite frankly, New York and New Jersey traffic terrifies me, so I don't really drive all that much. And also there's, on the other side of the road, so I was very nervous about that. What my school actually did for me was sign me up for a couple of driving lessons, and that was amazing. I can't recommend that enough. It does not take as long as you'd think to acclimate to the other side of the road, but it was nice to be able to make that adjustment like within a controlled setting. And then also getting my driver's license was difficult because that's, it's always difficult to get a driver's license, get on that as soon as you can. But again, I had support from my school. They drove me to and from the place. So maybe not like the biggest hurdle, but in my mind, it was a pretty big one. I think a lot of people are concerned about that as well. So.
Yeah, that's a big one, especially driving on the other side of the road. I know can be a huge issue.
Yeah, not as bad as you think.
And you get into it pretty quickly. For me, one of the biggest issues I kept running into was the Japanese healthcare system and how they approached health differently. So while I was there, I visited the ER several times just because things happen. Got thrown from a bike, hit by a car, cut my finger, broke my leg, monkey attack. It's great. But I will say, all of those things, it just was really hard for me to get over the fact that the doctor is going to tell you things and you're not going to ask any follow-up questions. For me, I'm used to America where ridiculous costs aside, I say what's wrong, the doctor understands my symptoms, tells me what they think is going on, and tells me why they think. But in Japan, there was none of that. Like, I broke my leg, had to get surgery, and they gave me 2 options, but they didn't really go into depth. I had to sort of force some questions and push for what I wanted. And so I really had to advocate for myself to a degree that felt uncomfortable, especially when you're used to living within the Japanese culture where you're a little more passive. So that was huge, especially after I broke my leg. The recovery timeline was incredibly different from what it would be in the US. Like, they had me walking a day after surgery and putting weight on my ankle and things like that. My ankle's great now as a result, but it was really rough and difficult to deal with at the time. So flexibility, again, and just understanding what makes you comfortable and makes you uncomfortable, and understanding how to make yourself comfortable in the situation.
I would like to quickly add, though, that Japan does have universal health care, so everything is covered. It is super cheap.
Yes.
When I got back in 2020, I was like, what's a deductible? What's a copayment? I didn't understand it at all. Still actually kind of don't. But there's that. It covers everything, which is nice. And it's fully paid for by Japan. So it's great.
Just on that topic, so I was in the hospital for maybe a total of 10 days. I had 2 surgeries, a bunch of physical therapy. I was in a semi-private room. I think it cost maybe $50. Yeah, so not only do we have the universal health care, then the JET program also has supplementary health insurance. So anything that I spent, even my taxi rides got covered because I couldn't bike. I think I had to get a new pair of shoes because I had a hobbit foot going on, and so that got reimbursed. There's a lot of coverage, which is really, really nice. So I know a lot of people who got health care in Japan instead of coming home to a doctor that they were used to.
I want to add one more thing. I'm sorry about health, just because I've just gone through the ringer in here. But like here, I've found out that you have to have referrals for pretty much everywhere you go, any specialist. But in Japan, you can just like, oh, I know there's something wrong with my ear. I'm going to go to the ear doctor.
Yeah.
And it just cuts a lot of time out. It's so nice.
So now we're going to talk about the happy fluffy stuff again. So let's start with Samantha. What did you love about your placement?
So my placement, and this is true of a lot of placements, but my placement had some really good local festivals. But something that was unique to mine was that I was actually 30 minutes away from a military base. So that doesn't automatically mean that you're going to make English-speaking friends. You still have to put yourself out there. But sort of as a supplement to that, my area was known for, there was a Japanese guy who just sort of adopted all the Jets. Like he'd go to the orientations, he'd go to the yearly parties, and he'd just like find everybody and gather them all up. And then he held sort of a social meeting that was supposed to be like an English-Japanese exchange, but was really just hanging out. So that really brought all of the ALTs and all the base people together. So it was just a very unique kind of social situation, which probably doesn't apply to every placement, but you never know. You got to put yourself out there and like be in the places where if your prefecture has a guy who likes to adopt the Jets, they'll find you. So that was really fun.
Absolutely, and there are a lot of those placements where you have a Japanese person who will effectively adopt you. Most of my friends had at least one. Rosie, what about you?
So this is going to sound weird, but the absolute best thing about my placement was that there was nothing going on. And so that meant anytime anything happened, everyone got super hyped about it. Like I'm talking the day I arrived, they took me straight from the airport to meet the mayor, and then they put me on TV because they were so excited to have a new teacher come to town. Like there was nothing going on in Ishikawa. But that means like when it was time for festivals, the whole town was coming out, and you have the entire town dancing at festival time. Or when they put me on TV again because the library was doing something, I'll be honest, I don't remember what they were doing, but everyone was very hype about the library, and I did a commercial about it, and I probably lied because I didn't know what was happening, but it was great. Just all that to say, the sense of community, like what that comes, like because I was in a deep Inaka town, I was about 15 hours west of Tokyo by night bus, and the closest big city was like an hour away, so like we were very deep in the countryside, and so because it was kind of just us out there, and the East Sea was blocking on one side, mountains on the other side, we were very kind of isolated, everyone just kind of had to become one big family, just because like there was no one else out there to help us.
That's awesome. One thing you definitely have to get used to, depending on where you are, is being a D-list celebrity, approximately. A lot of us, I was known as the one foreigner on a mountain bike. You get known for random things, and you will appear on TV without realizing it sometimes.
I was A-list. I don't know about you, but I was A-list.
Excuse me, I should just speak for myself.
Some people recognize me from the hot spring, which was slightly embarrassing, but whatever.
Awesome. So next up is, how did you grow while on the JET program, professionally or personally, and what skills did you develop that help you now? We spoke about this a little bit, but let's hear from Lucas first.
Yeah, I grew in age, for one, because that's how time works. Sorry for the bad joke. But I grew personally by making so many incredible, long-lasting friends, and really putting myself out there in a community that I was not used to yet. I sort of accidentally got into a dance group, a Yosakoi dance team, because of a language mistake that I made. And it was the best mistake I've ever made, because I love that community so much. It's where I primarily practice Japanese, and I love dancing. About the... Oh, I just thought, so the mistake basically was that there was this amazing festival in Japan that I loved. It was my city's yearly festival. It was a dance thing. I thought there was always like a team that was just teaching people how to dance it around this music stadium or music stage, and I thought that's what it was. I just thought it was like helping people wear the same outfit, and I thought that in Japanese, I thought that's what they were saying. Lucas, you want to join us doing this? And that's what I thought it was. And it turned out it was actually like a dance performance competition on stage. So when I went to the first practice, I was like, oh, okay. And I ended up loving it so much. So thank you for the follow-up question. But yeah, so that's how I grew personally, and I made Japanese grandparents there, Japanese parents, and I still keep in contact with them. They're so sweet. And professionally, of course, as I mentioned before, like it's really helped me grow as a professional with public speaking, with intercultural awareness and openness and sensitivity, and being able to manage my time and do so many different soft skills and hard skills that many employers look for.
Thank you. Samantha.
So professionally, I really do want to emphasize the public speaking aspect again, because I always knew that I didn't mind public speaking, but I really did kind of develop a love for it when I was over there. And in terms of like personal growth, I really discovered that I had a lot of independence, because I do speak Japanese, but I'd never gone to a doctor by myself and stuff like that. So at first, whenever I had to do anything, car thing came up, I would go to one of my co-teachers and they'd come with me. And after a while, it was just like, I don't feel like getting somebody to come with me. I'm just going to go do it. And like figuring out that I can do it, even if there's a little bit of bumbling involved, was really nice to know. And it's definitely helped me out after as well.
Great, thank you. So I'm actually going to combine the next two, and I'm going to let Lucas answer these first. So what are some tips to make a strong application to the JET program, and what can people start doing now to make their applications stronger?
Good questions. The first thing I'm going to first of all want to say, the applications open every year in September. That is when it opens, and it ends in November. So it's a very, kind of a small window of time, but there's a lot of time to prepare. When you are applying, my biggest tip is to really follow the directions carefully and read very carefully. It's a pretty long process, a long application, and I know what we do to grade the applications. There's a lot of people who accidentally forget to submit a document, or they submit the wrong document because they weren't paying attention to the instructions, or they missed a question that they were supposed to actually answer as required. Definitely make sure you do that. That is one of my biggest tips. Another tip is to find your references early and give them heads up. You need 2 references. And everything is completely done on the portal. It's 100% online, but do that early. For your statement of purpose, this is the most important part of the essay. Make sure that it covers all of the prompts that we give. You will see that on the online. Ask your friends to review it with a critical eye. Ask your professors to read it with a critical eye. Ask them to see, does it hit all of the prompt points? And ask for feedback, grammatical checks, et cetera, et cetera. I look at the applications, statements of purpose, I see grammatical errors on a lot of applications. I see kind of stranger metaphors, and kind of fun. There was one that was about ice cream, but think about if it actually covers what you're talking about. So that's my biggest tip. Those are my big tips. Some things you can start doing now to help make you stand out, or to also put in your application, is get involved with Japanese communities, such as if there's an anime club or a Japanese association. Start going to that. Start volunteering at different associations. For example, the Japan American Society of Washington, D.C., or anywhere in your local neighborhood. Any kind of experience that you can put down really helps a lot. As well as doing any type of study for Japanese can get you ahead. It is not required by any means to speak Japanese or have any Japanese ability, but it will help you to live there, and it looks good in the application. And if you have any access to teaching materials, such as taking a TESOL certificate course, that can also go a long way. That is teaching English to speakers of other languages, et cetera, et cetera. Those are my very in a nutshell kind of things to start doing now, and tips.
Lucas gave a pretty comprehensive group of things, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. Just 2 points I wanted to add. You would be applying for JET through your embassy or consulate. So you just, for example, I was living in Iowa at the time, so I applied through Chicago, but California has a couple, New York, it depends on where you're at. You would be applying through them, and you're really only competing with the people who are in that group then. Right? Yes. Another thing is I found out about JET my freshman year of college, and I knew it was what I wanted to do, and so I started signing up for peer tutoring opportunities, especially for our incoming international students, so that I had sort of proof that I could work with people from other cultures and other languages, and I could still get complex communication and complex ideas across to them. So those are 2 things, additional things that you can do even if it's not directly related to Japan, even if you're in an area where there's not a lot of Japan focus. So that's something to think about. So last question before we open things up, what is something that you recommend those going to Japan try to do or just try in general? So we'll start with Rosie on that.
Ooh, what you should definitely try to do is join a team or go to community events. Like Lucas talked about Yosakoi, I accidentally joined an elderly Ikebana class for 4 months because I did not know how to tell the old lady who ran it that I did not want to keep coming. She was very scary, in a very nice, sweet way. But I'm really glad I did that because through that I heard about a cooking class just for foreigners, which is how I met one of my best friends through that class. And then I joined a yoga studio run by this man, Jin Sensei, who's like a tiny elf. I loved him. All that to say, it's just like the community just keeps building and building because there's the obvious cultural stuff. Like I could tell you, go to temples, try and climb Fujisan, all that stuff. And like any guidebook you look up is gonna tell you do that stuff. But whatever town you're going to be in, and there's just little people, just like, okay, that sounded very condescending. Let me reword that. Just everyday people who are just living their lives and who just own a gym or who teach archery classes or just stuff you're not going to find if you just Google things to do in Japan. And those are the memories, those are the connections that last. And so when you go to Japan, really, like, even if you end up in a city, you're not a city person, or vice versa, you end up in the countryside, you're not a country person, really try and build that community and build with those people wherever you end up, because you never know where it's going to take you.
I think that's a great point. There's always that sort of Jenga of social interactions. Samantha.
Yeah, so just sort of build on that a little bit. So I ended up in a choir. I was actually one of the founding members of the choir just because I was in the right place at the right time. The music teacher for the school I was at was in that day, and she saw something on my desk and we started talking about music, and she said, "Oh, I'm starting a choir." And I said, "Oh, can I be in it?" So don't be afraid to explore your hobbies in sort of like local ways. And also, particularly if you're a little bit more rural, but even if you end up in a city, this will be a thing. There's always local festivals. Usually they're seasonal, so like my town had an autumn festival, we had a summer festival. There will probably be opportunities to get involved in that. So I'm big into drums, so I ended up going to one of the meets for our autumn festival, and I got to play like the big taiko drum on the back of one of the floats. So definitely try to get involved with that if you can.
Thank you. So that's our pre-written section. If you have questions, I invite you to come up to the microphone. Otherwise, we have more questions we can pull from. Is there anyone with questions?
Oh, and can I say one thing too?
Yeah.
If you don't have any questions and you end up wanting to leave, we have a few brochures just in the back seat over there. Go ahead and take one if you are going to head out early. But otherwise, stick around, listen to the questions. I'm sure there's going to be some great ones.
So we have one person on the mic.
Any tips for the interview part after your application's gone through?
That's a great question.
It's a great question, yeah, for sure. Well, one thing that I recommend doing for interviews beforehand is to start thinking about questions that you believe might be on the interview itself. There's going to be questions about any cultural experiences you've had. There's going to be questions about any hardships that you might deal with in Japan and how you will handle it and cope with it. I also really recommend being very open and friendly, showing good energy, especially if you're going to be an assistant language teacher. Because assistant language teachers, they are very energetic, and they like to, they're motivating the students, they're energizing the students. You don't need to be like really silly or wacky or anything, but smile, show that you are energetic and really positive about answering questions, and I think that goes a long way. Also have maybe one question or two questions at the end ready to go. I think that's always a nice thing to do. And this year, if the interviews are actually all virtual, don't think that's an excuse to not dress up, and make sure that your background on your Zoom background is professional as well. I think that's also important. We had one year someone had a cat on their lap, and then checked their phone once during the interview while and I was like, okay.
Did they get in?
No. So yeah. So be professional about that. And lastly, I just say, like, if it feels like a conversation to you, it's going well. You know, I think that's a good sign if it feels like a conversation with the panelist.
And I think those are good tips for all interviews as well.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, always have a question at the end of any interview. I also wanted to say there typically is a list of typical interview questions floating around on Reddit. I found it. You can also just Google it. People compile these lists so that you can get a good idea of what might be asked.
Yeah, I will be careful about sometimes Reddit does go a little into the extremes. You may not see some of the extreme questions there, but yeah, definitely check out some online questions for sure.
And if I could add one thing, I think don't be afraid to personalize your answers either, because like very much, if you're like me, you get in your head about interviews, you're trying to think, what do they want to hear? But when I think back to my interview, where I think I felt the turning shift in the room was when they'd asked about, like, what can you bring to the students? And I started talking about starting a book club with them. And because of my love of reading and writing and passion, and like kind of talking about how do I transfer literature and how do you build that gap when you have students who have like a language gap. And that was something very specific to my experience I could elaborate on. So don't be afraid to like stray a little bit from what you expect the textbook answer to be and really go into what you are passionate about, because that's going to come through.
Yeah. One last thing. They might ask you about, hey, if you could teach a holiday, how would you go about it? Or if you could teach something about a famous person, who would you choose and how would you go about it? Think of a lesson plan ahead of time. You probably won't have to act it out, but you should be able to explain, like, how are you going to make lesson plans? How are you going to incorporate things in class? So look up a few things, like maybe before, about how to, you know, do an actual good class. So looking up some teaching English to speakers of other languages is a good thing. And just looking up something about the JET program. You know, we aren't just teaching, we are international exchange program. We want people to like cultural grassroots exchange. So if you can mention that, that's really important.
Yeah.
If you are a CIR, if you're going to be a coordinator for international relations, there is going to be a Japanese test on the interview.
Yeah, if I can just add quickly, I did have to act out my lesson a little bit, but it wasn't for very long. It was like a minute, and then they cut me off. So don't be too nervous about that. You don't have to have like a whole 30-minute thing planned.
They also just really want you to think on your feet, which you're going to have to do a lot, regardless of what position. So they want to make sure you can do that.
Yeah.
All right, next question.
You were talking about the medical care over there, and you're talking about just having to pay $50 for the hospital. Is that only for the JET program, or is that for tourism in general? Do you know?
So, no, Lucas, go for it.
Well, it's not for tourism. If you're a tourist, you won't be covered by health insurance. But if you are a resident of Japan, you are covered.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, yeah, next up.
Hi there. I work for Honda in Ohio, and one of my interests was, I guess, immersing myself in the language a little bit more. Do you guys recommend any like programs to learn kanji, katakana? Sorry if I missed that in the beginning, but like Duolingo, Rosetta Stone, there's just so many that I have no idea where to start.
So I think we all have some Japanese, like varying levels. Do we just sort of want to go down the line and talk about how we, learned and how we maintain it?
Sure, yeah. I will just say any little bit of anything you do is going to help a lot. You know, just do a little bit every day of something. Duolingo is a good one. I took university classes actually when I was a university student. It's a university class. And I do think finding also an individual tutor, private tutor, is also a really good thing. If you I know you may not have, if you don't have a lot of money, I know it can be hard to like say, I don't want to pay money, but I do feel like private lessons can go a long way because you're paying something into it, and you'll feel more structured, and also someone teaching you will like try hard to actually teach. Maybe you had a point about that?
Yeah, in certain cities, they actually provide that for a very small fee. Like,
Oh, nice.
You go to your city, inside the city, and they'll have a group of Japanese that are there to teach Japanese and English for cheaper. It's a group class, but...
And you mentioned kanji specifically? You mentioned kanji specifically. The app that helped me most was Wani Kani. That's WANI KANI, which is an app versus something like Duolingo, which is focused on speaking. Wani Kani's focus was reading and writing kanji, and that had to be the app that probably got me from like very beginning reading to like pretty much intermediate, just working through that app. And so if kanji is your focus, I would definitely highly recommend that one.
So I swore by a program called Anki for a while. That's ANKI. That's a flashcard program. So what you do is you download the program. I have PC, I'm sure they have it for Mac as well, and then you can go to their website and people have compiled lists of flashcards. So I did it for kanji, I did it for vocabulary. I haven't really done it since I came back from Japan, but certainly preparing to go, that was what I did for a long time. And I also took classes in university and I actually did like a year-long language program in Japan, but the kanji will absolutely get you, so. Yeah, that's what I recommend.
Another tip that I often recommend when learning any language, I recommended it for my students in Japan as well, is watching Netflix in the target language, but with the target language subtitles. It helps reinforce listening and reading. And so if you're having trouble reading, but you're a pretty good listener, that can help you match things.
That goes for games as well.
Yes, video games. So doing something in the target language is also huge. So, for example, I signed up for a taiko group, and no one spoke English, and so I was sort of forced into learning more Japanese if I wanted to learn this activity. So often, if you find an activity you're excited about and see if you can do it in your target language rather than just studying, because then you can often be more motivated that way.
I'd like to add about the Netflix thing. There's actually an extension on Google Chrome, I believe, that's like learning languages with Netflix or something, where you can actually, it will pause, you can pause it, you can slow down the words, you can go line by line, it will automatically pause, you can rewind to that last point really easily and just keep listening. But yeah, it is really good to only have the target languages subtitles, so Japanese subtitles, not English, and really try your best to listen. So I agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Particularly for games, if anybody's into Pokemon is a really good one for that, because the modern ones all have built-in language options. You can change it at any time, and it's fairly simple.
Do not recommend trying to do Kingdom Hearts in Japanese, though. Learn that the hard way. Next question, please.
For those of you in remote areas, did you have to get a car, and what was the process for that?
Yeah, yeah, I had to get a car. It was very simple for me. The ALTs just had one car that they passed down from generation to generation. So the car guy, I think he worked for the insurance company, but he actually came to our school. And it was just a very simple process. My teachers helped me do the paperwork. I paid a little bit of money to my predecessor because she'd paid a little bit to her predecessor. It was just a very simple transfer. It kind of depends on where you're placed on what that process will be. I know a lot of places do have the car that's like passed down, like mine, but either way, there will be people around to help you get the car.
Same with mine too, because there was a company that the Board of Education worked with who had experience working with foreigners and getting them cars, and so I technically had a long-term rental, and so I was renting for like the 2 years I was there, but because of the agreement they had, it was slightly cheaper than like how it might sound to rent a car for 2 years, versus I did have some friends who just outright bought theirs, and that is an option as well, and there are guides to being a foreigner buying a car in Japan, so there are options, and Lucas might be able to confirm this, but one thing I have heard is that like if you can't drive, they will try not to place you in a place where you're gonna need a car to survive. And so they tend to be pretty good about that, like listening, because you have a section where you can put down, like, are your preferences urban, rural, remote, and there's never any guarantee, no promises, but I have heard people, like friends, they're like, I put down, I don't have a license, I can't drive, and the majority of them got in places where either like everything was walkable or they had good public transportation. And so there are, like, they will work with you, like, to a degree, yeah.
Yeah, that is one of the questions in the application, like, do you have a driver's license? I said yes, and I got a placement that didn't need a card. But yeah, like if they're not going to put you in a place if you do not have a license, and if you cannot drive, they will not put you in a place that. But that doesn't mean you should put no. Please be honest about that. But because I was actually in a rural area too. And even though I said yes, I still ended up in a rural area. So if you're trying to do that no for an urban area, it's still not even possible. It may not happen.
And I was in urban-ish, very technically a city. And I put that yes, I can drive. I from the Midwest, grew up driving. But in the interview, I said yes, but I'm not super comfortable potentially driving in Japan. And so I got put in a place where I survived for the 4 years without a car and just my bike, but I was the only ALT in the area who didn't have a car, and I was just stubborn. Like there was a car passed down, but it was like a smaller sedan, but it felt like a boat on the tiny roads with the gaijin traps, the storm drains on the side. And so I just got rid of it. But there are also a lot of Board of Educations, the government offices that you might be working for might have a car for you that you are allowed to use and only drive school to school. So there's a lot of different options, and there are a lot of guides out there.
And kind of a really niche knowledge here, but if you are from Virginia, if you have a license from Virginia, Maryland, state of Washington, Hawaii, and I think Ohio, if you have a license from one of those states, there's actually a driving license reciprocity where you can automatically convert your license to a Japanese one. Otherwise, you will have to get an international driver's permit, which lasts for only a year, and after that, you'll have to actually take the driver's test in Japan to get the Japanese license.
Which is a whole thing, but there are a lot of guides out there. A lot of people have done it throughout the years, and so you won't be alone for that. Yeah. Okay, so next question. Welcome back.
Sorry, thank you guys so much for your time. Is there a version of Sesame Street or a kids show to help learn the language? Or if, I don't think it translates well, but if
a vocabulary-based children's show?
Yeah. Or just anything to immerse in the culture as well, because ultimately those kid shows do simplify things and at least make it palatable. So curious if there's anything like that out there.
There definitely is. Although I do not know any names of them off the top of my head, but I one day randomly met a family in the grocery store and became friends, and they invited me over all the time for grilling out, hanging out, and their kids were 3 years old, 2 years old, and they always had some YouTube TV show in the background doing anything. But I don't know, unfortunately, any of the titles, but I'm sure if you look it up online, Japanese children's shows, but there's a lot there, yeah.
Yeah, Anpanman might be something to look at. I don't know how vocabulary-based that is, but it's definitely, I did a homestay for a little bit, and they had a 2-year-old, and she was always watching that.
What was it called?
Anpanman.
Yeah.
So it's ANPANMAN.
Anpanman he's a superhero made of bread, and he takes off his head pieces and gives it to you to strengthen you or something.
It's very cute.
I have a personal vendetta against him, but that's a whole other thing. But he is everywhere. You'll see baby toys with him. I also recommend getting kids manga. Kids comic books, they will tend to be all in hiragana, and when they do have kanji, they'll often have furigana, so the hiragana on top of the kanji to break it down and make it a little more accessible.
Yeah.
That's also a really good idea.
Doraemon would probably be a good one for that.
Doraemon's a popular one. A lot of my friends also watched, I want to call it Saturday morning cartoons, but it was a block of educational stuff for kids every single day in the morning, right before they'd be going to school typically. And those were really good at teaching vocabulary.
Yeah. And another one, this isn't vocabulary based, this is just a cartoon for kids, but Chibi Marco-chan is another one that will probably be simplified, digestible, sort of easier to get into if you're just trying to listen for the vocabulary and context.
And one more, this one, it might be geared towards teaching Japanese kids English, but it was Shimataro. I remember that was really popular with one of my teachers, her kids. And that one, since there are words in English are going to be there already, you can then focus on the actual parts of the episode in Japanese. So that's Shimataro, Shimataro. He's a tiger.
Excellent question. Do we have any other questions?
Where were the pamphlets in the back?
Oh, they're just on the chair there. I also have pamphlets right here for all y'all. So if you want to come up and get two at the end of this. I also have a QR code here. This is to our link tree, which leads to our website, to the JET Alumni website, to other links, our Facebook, our Twitter. You can follow us for updates, which will tell you things about like when the applications are opening, when they've opened, when they've closed, any other really cool events that are Japanese related, which again, hint, can probably help with your, showing like, hey, I'm interested in Japan. Look at this application thing. I went to this thing. So this is, I don't know if you can see it, but if anyone wants to come check it out, that's that.
I had a thought and it immediately left. Completely forgot. So do we want to do a couple more questions? Or, we can also talk about random things like having dinner with Yakuza. One of my favorite stories. We can tell random stories as well.
Yeah, and if anybody has a question that they think of, they just feel free to come up.
Yeah, what we do wildest, like what is one, we have an actual question, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, I just was wondering if you could direct me to the app that you mentioned, Wanikani?
Oh, Wanikani? Oh, yeah. The name is spelled Wanikani. Yeah, I did on the phone, but I would just go to their website first and see what the system requirements are.
Oh, so it's for computer too?
Yes, I believe it did. Yeah,
I use on computer as well.
Yeah. But do we want to do our wildest jet stories while we're just in here until another question comes?
Sounds like she's got a wild jet story, so go for it. Yeah.
Y'all, I had some wild times in Japan. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. I don't know if I should tell the being stuck on Mount Fuji story.
I can tell my Yakuza story.
Oh yeah, tell the Yakuza story.
Cool. So Yakuza, if you aren't aware, they are organized crime, think mafia, without guns and swords instead. They tend to be in areas, a lot of the times they're in like the ports of cities. They're around like construction typically is where they thrive. And like I said, my prefecture was the second poorest, and so we had a lot of criminal activity in that regard. And we had a lot of pachinko parlors, so we had a lot of gambling as well. And so I was at a festival in our the Port Towns Festival, and we were just sort of wandering around, and I happened to be volunteering, and there was this random guy who happened to be really amused by the fact that I spoke Japanese, and that I was translating for two of my friends who were there as well. And so I didn't realize it, but like we were just chatting. He had on like a jinbei, so like a wrap shirt, short sleeves. He had on like longish pants, and he invited us just to come over to his place to just have some like sashimi, just have some afternoon snacks. We get there, and his front yard has this massive U of tables built with a whole bunch of intense-looking guys sitting around, all of them pretty covered up, and an empty seat at the head of the table. And he sat down and moved two guys away or a couple guys away so the three of us could sit down. And we were just chatting, like I was the only woman there, it was like just a bunch of people. And as he started moving, I started seeing flashes of tattoos underneath. And as we were chatting, I was like, oh, okay, I know who this is. My friends look at me and went, Jody, is he? I was like, yeah, we're just gonna be chill, like everything's fine, it's daylight, we're fine, we teach some of their kids, everyone be cool. And he was really lovely, and it was just really high quality fish, so it was great. That's what I got out of it.
Nice. Also, looks like we have a question.
Yeah.
So I'm currently in school, but I'll be graduating soon, and I'll be looking for employment. And I was just wondering how you plan around like having a job, but also wanting to do the JET program, but also not being able to leave like work for like 3 months and all that. Yeah.
That's an excellent question.
Yeah. So you'd be graduating in like 2024 or what? 2020. Oh, 2020. So, well, the application for the 2023 program is now closed. It ended in November. But if you are, for example, next year, for the 2024 program, applications open in September 2023. If you have not yet graduated, you will have to just submit a proof of expected graduation to say that you're going to be graduating by like June 24th, 2024 or something like that. And the part about the job, can you explain that again?
So I think it's how do you get a job that you know you might be quitting shortly to go
I see.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Depending on the job, you can either be open about it and say like, listen, like I applied to the JET program, like there's a chance I could be gone by this time. I hope that is okay with you. If it's maybe a prestigious job, you might want to do that. If it's like a not so prestigious job, which doesn't mean it's a bad job, it probably doesn't matter. So I think it depends on what you are going for. But I would say don't let it stop you from taking a job that you want to have. And in fact, like if you end up having that job anyway and you end up loving it so much already, you may actually find a good thing there and not want to do the JET. Yeah, I don't know. Any other tips for that? Or I don't know.
No, I think, so like when I was graduating, I was also applying for JET at the same time. And so I was applying to things in hopes that I wouldn't need to use them. But it depends on what kind of job it is. As Lucas said, you just give them your 2 weeks notice and you leave. Also, right out of college, I hope you land your dream job, but I know mine wasn't. Well, mine was JET, but when I first got back from JET, absolutely not my dream job. There are plenty of jobs that are really good and teach you very good skills, but you can also leave at any time. So, yeah, I think it's just, I also wouldn't, unless it's incredibly prestigious, if it's incredibly prestigious, take that job, stay at the job. Japan will be there, there'll be a lot of cool opportunities, but otherwise I just wouldn't tell them until it's about 2 or 3 weeks out. Thank you. You're welcome, good luck.
Good question.
Right.
Yeah.
And then,
We got like 9 minutes left?
9 minutes. I mean, do y'all have a question, or else we can tell another wild JET story? All right.
Wild JET story.
Wild JET story. Okay, so Japan has 3 holy mountains. Mount Fuji, the famous one, Hakusan, Tateyama. I've had shenanigans happen on all 3 mountains. So I'm gonna start with Fuji because that's the most famous one. So me and my group were supposed to be walking up Fuji together, right? But they're like, Rosie, you are too slow, so we're just gonna go. Are you gonna be like good by yourself? And so that was a very shitty thing to do, but I was just like, you know what, sure, y'all wanna walk, you guys go. So I am now on Mount Fuji by myself. You're supposed to stay buddy system, did not do that. So I'm just like walking along, couple hours pass, and I find my whole group, they're all passed out because they went too fast because their plan was to charge up Mount Fuji, so none of them have any energy left. So I'm just like, nah, well, bye. So I'm going up the mountain. It starts to rain, and so now there's a thunderstorm happening on Mount Fuji, and I'm just like, well, there's only way to go is up, so I'm just gonna keep on going up. A helicopter starts coming around the mountain saying, there is a thunderstorm, get off of Mount Fuji. At this point, I'm a mile from the top, and I'm like, well, damn it, like, what? But I gotta listen to Helicopter Man. So there's thunder, there's lightning, there's rain, I'm by myself here, and so they have these little outposts that like are just on the mountain, so I'm just kind of sitting there like, do I brave the thunderstorm, or do I get flooded out, or do I just die on Mount Fuji? I guess these are my options here. And then like, I need you guys to imagine this, like there's just gray everywhere, and then out of the mist, the tiniest old woman you've ever seen, like think from a Ghibli movie, just kind of comes like hobbling along, and she's like, are you okay? And I'm like, honestly, no. And she's like, do you need help getting off the mountain? I'm like, yeah, I don't know which way's down, and I don't want to fall off Mount Fuji. And she's like, okay, don't worry, my son-in-law, he's American, he will help you, let's go. And so this like tiny old like decrepit woman, imagine Sophie from House Moving Castle, is like just leading me like this big, strong, like American girl, like down the mountain. She's like, I've climbed Fuji 7 times. I'm like 90. This is just what I do. And her son-in-law turned out to be this giant Marine. And he's like, yo, Ma, who's that? She's like, can you help her? And so he basically carries me down Mount Fuji in the middle of a thunderstorm on the back of this giant Marine and his tiny mother-in-law. And later on, the group was freaking out. They're about to send, because I got down the mountain like maybe 4 hours after everyone else. And they're like, where were you? We were about to do a church party. What's going on? I'm like, I am good. Don't worry about me. I just had like a magical transformative experience. So, moral of the story, if you're climbing the mountains, don't leave your buddies, but if you do, they might have a Ghibli moment. So.
Okay, so we've got about 7 minutes. We might want to just wrap up so the next group can set up if they want to.
I don't know if there is a next group, actually.
Oh, then never mind.
I think there is a next group, yeah, there's...
Never mind, forget I said that, sorry.
Okay, cool. Thank you all so much for coming. Please feel free to reach out. I remember what I was going to say now. There are alumni organizations in like most cities, especially they typically pair with the consulate or the embassy. So please keep an eye out for their Facebook pages. We do, like I'm on the JET AA, the JET DC alumni group. And we do a lot of activities where we would love prospective people to come too. You can talk to other alumni. I will also say that was one of the biggest selling points for me telling my parents I was going to do this crazy thing and move to a country that I'd never been to but the good news is there's an alumni network. I can get a job afterwards. So we have a really strong alumni network, especially in DC, especially if you're working in education or any kind of international education, you will find JETs. We also get discounts to certain grad schools if once you finish JET. There are a lot of incentives for it outside of the program itself. So check us out online and we'll probably be around a little bit after the panel if you have some one-on-one questions.
And if anybody here is from the tri-state area, New York is also very, very active, and that sort of encompasses New Jersey and Philly as well. So like I'm on the board for New York, but I'm from New Jersey.
Awesome.
And,
all right.
Oh, can I say, sorry, just one last thing. I just want to really reiterate one more time. I mean, the JET program is literally the opportunity of a lifetime. I can't tell you how many alumni I've spoken to who have said, I was planning to be there only 1 year or 2 years, and now look at me, I was there for 5 years or more. It's changed my life, and I'm so happy I went. And there are over 35,000 alumni in the USA alone. Over 75,000 across the world, because there's 52 countries that participate in the JET program. So it's definitely worth the opportunity. Last thing, come get a brochure. They're also in the back seat over there. In the back if you want to hop out there, but come get this or come check out this QR code for our links. That's all from me.
All right.
Thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you for still being here.
Thank you.